Hi everyone, and welcome to video 5 of the Easy Knit Dress class. In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay out your fabric as well as your pattern piece on the fabric and 2 methods of cutting out. Please remember that on my dress that I am making, I am having the front as one solid piece, but the back is going to be princess seam. So I'm going to show you how to deal with both. In addition, minutes 1 through 20 are going to be the fundamentals of what you're going to need for the class. However, from minutes 20 on, you're going to see how I deal with the issue of not having enough fabric, because it happens to me more times than I care to admit. So I had to get a little creative and think outside the box. So if you want to get a bonus, be sure to watch after minute 20. So let's get started now at the cutting table. Here are the 2 fabrics that I'm going to use to teach you how to make the Easy Knit Dress class. And this first one is a double brush poly. Very drapey, very easy to wear. And this next one is a French terry that was gifted to me by a customer. It's just very beautiful. And I'm going to cut out this one first. So let's go right to the cutting table and get it laid out. I laid my fabric on my cutting table, and you're going to see in the back and on the side over here that my fabric is hanging off the edge. It's one thing you don't want to do, and I will address that when I'm actually laying the pattern out on the fabric. But right now I wanted to show you something. This is the wrong side of the fabric. This is my print side. And a question that I often get is, how do I fold my fabric? Do I fold my fabric with the wrong sides together like this so I can put the pattern piece on the right side? Or do I fold my fabric like this and then put my pattern on? What I can tell you is there's no right or wrong. I know that makes it clear as mud, but think of it this way. Sometimes the rib on a piece of fabric is going to be easily seen on the wrong side. And what is a rib? If you look very closely at your fabric, you can see little lines going across the fabric. And I'm going to show you that in a close-up. Now, usually I can find a rib better on the wrong side than on the right side of the fabric, but on this one it's a little bit different. I can see it better on the right side. So if I bring this up close and you look at this, you can see horizontal lines that are parallel to the selvage if you look really close. And this is where, when you lay this out, you want to make sure that you are folding your fabric on a rib and it's going straight across. So I can see a rib going straight across this way. The fold is actually not in line with the rib. I'll have to fold a little bit more, and then I can see that that is in line with a rib. My fabric is actually a little easier because what is helping me out is the print on the fabric. It's the repeat. So I'll show you that right now. Sometimes it's following the rib is made easier by the actual repeat itself, but you can't always guarantee that the repeat is perfectly aligned with the rib. So you have to be very careful. Oftentimes I feel it's easier to see the rib on the wrong side, but on this print I can see it very easily. Another thing that can trip people up is the selvage edge. Now if you look at this one, this selvage edge is very wide, it's curling, and sometimes that curl can get in the way for people. It is okay if you want to cut off your selvage right where it meets the fabric. You could do that. Other times you may have fabrics where the selvage pulls in very oddly, and you feel it's a problem when you're folding your fabric. I had someone in one of my classes where I work had a fabric like that. It is okay, absolutely okay, to cut into your selvage until it relaxes. So, ooh, these look exactly like my sharp scissors, but these are the dull ones. It's okay to make snips in your selvage to make sure that everything is lying flat and that your selvage is not pulling that fabric together. Here's my fabric laid out on my table, and you can see right here the repeat is making things very easy for me. So the first thing I want to do is align my pattern with the repeat, and I'm looking at these stars right here. So I want to make sure that they are all in alignment, and my stars that are right here are not going this way or this way. And if I look at the overall print, I can see that I'm right on target. Then I want to make sure that that rib on the fold of the fabric is even all the way across, so that rib is not skewing in either direction, it's going straight. Then I'm going to just straighten out this at the end. And you want to make sure that you have no ripples in your fabric. So I can feel right here, I have a ripple. If I gently peel this back, you can see that ripple. That's not a good thing to have. So I will just smooth that out and make sure that when I fold it back up, there are no ripples under that fabric. So you just want to be very careful going all the way across. All right, and then this right here. Okay. And I'm going to keep smoothing this out, running my hands across the fabric. So I just want to make sure everything is perfect, and then I'll join you back at the cutting table. Now that I've finished smoothing my fabric, I also want to double check the areas that are at the side. So if you look right here, you do not want to have the sides of your knit fabric hanging off of the edge of your table. So I just take the edge and I scrunch it up so it's not hanging. And I did the same right down here. Let me just angle the camera down so you can see this. I just bunch this up right here so it's not hanging off the table. Very important to make sure that's done. So now that everything is smooth, nothing's hanging off, I'm going to take my pattern piece, and I did the front and back separately. So the front of my dress is one piece, and the back of my dress I decided to do princess seams. So I don't like to put the top edge right close to the cut edge unless I am running out of fabric. So I'll put it about 1.5 inches away. Fold of my fabric is aligned with a line on my cutting mat. So it just makes it easier to make sure everything is straight. So I am going to go and pin my pattern only at the fold line. So it doesn't really matter where I start, whether it's the top or the bottom. I'll start right here, and I don't like using a lot of pins on knits because what happens is when you use a pin, sometimes on the underside it starts to buckle and almost get a little pleat. So I'll just put about 4 pins on the back right here. The rest that I'm going to do is not going to be with pins, but I'm going to use my very fancy pattern weights, also known as cat food. So I'll just make sure that this is smoothed out, and I don't use too many, just enough to make sure everything is laid out beautifully on the pattern piece. And I have one more down here. All right, I am ready to cut out. Now, if you're going to be using a scissors, please make sure you do this correctly. This is one of those little things that really annoys me when I see it on videos on the internet. Do not pick up your fabric and cut like this. You want to lay your opposing hand that's not holding the scissors and cut your fabric with your scissors, stabilizing the fabric as you go. Now, if you have a rotary cutter, you can use your rotary cutter to cut out your pattern and just go all the way around. When you get to the neckline on the front, you're going to want to look at these 2 lines. Now, this lower line is going to be your front neckline, and this higher line is the back neckline. So to make things super easy, what I do is I just cut into the pattern, and you don't want to do this when your pattern piece is pinned on. You can see that I have previously done this. So make snips into right up to that lower neckline line, and then when you go to cut out, just peel it back for that front neckline. So it makes it really easy to keep your whole pattern intact, and then you just cut on that area right there. When your pattern piece is cut out, you can take off your pattern weights, and then you want to pick up your washable marker or your chalk, and then I want to mark the center at the top and bottom. So I'm just going to peel this up, and right where that fold is, I'm just going to stick the tip of my washable marker right in there to mark that center at the bottom. And then I'm going to take the fold at the top, just stick my marker right in and just put a marker mark right at that center front. That's really going to help me out, especially at the top when I go to put the neckband on, so I know where the center is marked. If your pattern, like looking at this pattern, if your pattern would have notches, then you would mark your notches in your dots right now, but we don't have any. When we were doing pattern prep, I did have you mark balance lines on your pattern, and if you didn't do it, that's okay. but I am going to use the markings right here as my balance lines. I did balance lines on the back of my pattern, but I didn't do it on the front because this front piece was cut out a long time ago, and I didn't really think I needed the balance lines. But I am going to draw them in. So I'll use a balance line right here, perpendicular to the front fold. So that's what I'm using. And I'm going to do it at the waist as well. There's a dotted line right there, helps me keep it beautifully perpendicular. And there's also one right here. And so how do you transfer your balance lines? Well, there's a couple different ways you can do it. And how I like to do it is just a very simple method right here. So take a pin and put a pin right on my balance line here. And I don't need too many pins. All right, so I'm just going to put 2 pins here, 2 pins on this one as well. And don't put it too close to the center front, because it's not really going to help you out too much. All right. And right there. And then I'm going to do 2 pins right up here. And make sure your pins are, the entry and exit point are right on that line. Then what you're going to do is peel your pattern back and also the top layer of your fabric. So I'm looking for that pin right now and I see it. So I'm going to take my marker, and on both the top and bottom, I just want to use my washable marker and put a little point right there. I'm going to look for the next pin, peel it back, and I can see that pin, mark the top and bottom layer, as well as the pin right here. Just going to peel it back and look for the spread of the fabric in that pin. I'll take out that first set of pins. And now I'm going to look for the second set. So again, peel this back. So now we're ready to take off all the pins. And I'll move this aside. Let's open it up. And keep it on the flat surface, so now you know where to draw your balance line. So I'm going to take a straight edge, get all of your wrinkles out, make sure it's smooth. And I can see right here that here's my center front at the bottom, center front at the top. So now I'm going to connect the dots with the straight edge, and I'll join you back here to show you how that works out. Here you can see the balance lines that I drew on the fabric, and I didn't draw them all the way to the edges, but I have them going across most of the front pattern piece. And then here, edge to edge, and here at the top, pretty much edge to edge. I also drew a vertical line going from the center front at the top to the center front at the bottom. These lines are going to be really helpful as I get into fitting. Don't expect to solve all of your fitting problems with these balance lines, but it will give you a clue as to where some problems are occurring as we try this on. And you'll start to see if you have a very large bust, you might have skewing in this area. If you have a full tummy, you may see skewing in this area right here. Like I said, they're just a guideline right now, and I'd like you to get into the habit of using balance lines because they're super helpful. Here is the front flipped over, and you can see I have avoided that direct placement right on the bust line. So my bust line is going to be right here and here, and so I don't have any offensive placement of these patterns anywhere. So that's what I'm looking for. And you always want to double check as you're laying out your fabric, because if you have enough fabric, you can move your pattern up or down to avoid that inadvertent placement. All right, let's move on to the back. Here is the first piece of my back of the garment, of the Easy Knit dress. And this one right here is the side back. And it is not cut on fold because we created the 1/2 inch seam allowance right here. And if you are doing a back that is simply one piece, you can go and cut it out the same way as you did for the front. But since my back is princess seamed, I have a little more work to do. And now I'm going to put a pin right here at the beginning of the grain line. And I know that this edge right here is on 2 layers of fabric because I know I have a cut edge right here. So just double check on the underside. Once this is pinned, I'm going to measure down to my fold, and I'm getting 3 5/8. So I want to make sure that my grain line is at 3 5/8 the entire way down the grain line. So here I go, 3 5/8. Okay, move it down just a little bit. There we go. And then one more should do it. I don't like to overpin because it creates little pleats on the bottom. And then from here, I'm going to go over to my favorite pattern weights. You know it, cat food cans, and just smooth out the pattern and put the cans exactly where I need them. Please remember that when you are cutting out your fabric, this edge is right before the selvage. You never want to cut the selvage as part of your pattern piece or part of your seam allowances. All right, so now I'm ready to cut out this pattern piece. So you can get your rotary cutter or your scissors, and I am going to cut from the hem up the sides and then back down the front. My dress is now all cut out, so I'm just going to take away the fabric that I don't need. And you do want to make sure that you're mindful of where you're cutting, because you still need to cut out the sleeves, and I have one more pattern piece to cut out. But I want to make sure that everything is going in the same direction. This does have a print. Now, this print is kind of all over the place, so if I didn't have enough fabric to do everything the right way, for example, on the front piece I had neck and hem, and I am going neck and hem on this second piece. I could flip my pattern piece over, and instead of having neck to hem again, I could take my back piece and do it hem to neck, because you're not really going to tell on this type of print. But let's say you have a print that has words over it, you have to have it the same way. You don't want to flip your back piece upside down, because then your words will be upside down. So just be careful of that. Directional prints can be a challenge sometimes. So I'm going to move this over, and the last thing I want to do is just take my cans off. You know, I was going to say mark the center, front, and back, but on this piece, this is the side back, so I don't have to mark the center front and center back. So I'm just going to fold this up and set it aside. Here's the last piece that I have to cut out, and this is the center back piece, and this is going to be the princess seam right here. So here's my 1/2 inch seam allowance. This part is the center back, so it has to be cut on fold. Well, my fold is here. So when I put this on, and I'm going to try to maximize my fabric, so I know my edges are right here, and I'll move it down to about here and then go to cut it out. But wait a minute, I have to put this on the fold. There is nothing that says you cannot turn a pattern piece over. You have to do that when necessary and cut with the pattern piece upside down. All right, so I am ready to pin the center back to the fold of the fabric. And remember, just enough pins to keep it on the fold. And now I'm ready to cut this out. So I'll get my rotary cutter, and I'm going to start cutting. This pattern piece is now cut out, so I can remove what I don't need. And again, take your washable marker and you want to mark the center back. So I'll do that at the bottom, just a little color. At the top and bottom edges are going to make sure that you can easily identify the center front and center back. There are no additional markings, there's no notches, there's no dots, so I can take this off. Maybe I'll just leave one pin in to keep the pattern attached to the fabric right now. And there we go. Our almost last piece is cut out. Now don't forget, I'm going to set this aside. Don't forget, we do need to cut out the sleeves and the binding for the neck. So this is where this large scrap right here, this is going to be perfect for cutting out my sleeves. And some of this I can use for the neck binding, which we will get to. So save this large piece, it's going to come in handy. And I'll see you in the next video. Here's the floral fabric that I'm going to use, and I was going to use it to make another dress, but I do not have enough fabric to do that. So what I'm going to do is make some modifications to this. Now this is for the tunic top, that's the cut line. So I'm going to cut it into a top, but I don't want it wide like the dress. And I know I have a lot of give, I have made this before. So I folded this over or under to give me a 1-inch seam allowance, and it's not going to extend out as far. So when I lay this down, I want to minimize how much fabric I'm using because I'm going to have to do the same down here. And I probably won't have enough fabric, so what I'm going to have to do is reverse it. I think I'm going to have to do this on the other side. Now, can you do this? Well, on this particular print, I looked at it up and down, and I don't think it's really going to matter between the front and back because it's just a large print. It's kind of all over. You can't do this with every print. Sometimes you just have to have everything directional, but this I think will work. So I'm going to refold this. Again, you want to follow a rib, and on something like this, the ribs might be easier to see on the inside, so you might want to actually fold it the other way with your right sides together. Just depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I like it right sides together, sometimes I don't. What you do want to do is avoid having a boob at a flower. So right here, I know that the bust line is going to be right about here, and of course there is a flower right there. But when I rearrange the fabric and I bring this down, the way I fold it, I can also alter where that flower is going to be placed. So hopefully I can get it right here and not so in your face where the flowers are really coming at you. So I'm going to work on this and then I'll join you when I have everything all set up. This right here is going to be the front of my floral top. And always just double check everything, make sure everything is flat. I did notice when I was pushing this out that there is a stain right here. That doesn't show on the right side, so I'm not too worried about it. When I cut this out, I don't have to take off this piece right here. I can simply fold it back on that line, and then I will cut out the top on that line. So it's pretty easy to do. Just have to make sure that this curled edge is laying flat so I can get that really nice there. And then I'm just going to finish cutting this out, and we still have to cut, since this is the front, I do have to cut this back. I'm going to show you how I do the neckline when I finish cutting out this piece. This right here is my neckline. Now the lower neckline is for the front and the higher neckline is for the back. So when I cut out the second piece, I'm just going to cut along this outer line again and not do anything with it. But an easy way to cut out the lower neckline is I'm putting my finger between the pattern and the fabric so I don't cut the fabric, and just cut along here so that we can very easily fold this back just like this. And then what I can do is get my rotary cutter and just cut along this line for the front. You got to be careful because this is very sharp. Go over here. Here's a perfect example of what I run into all the time, because often when I buy my fabric yardage online, I buy it in 2 to 3 yard increments, and I'm really trying to squeak out something with this pretty fabric that I like. So when I went to put my top on, you can see I'm not going to have enough fabric. So what am I going to do? Well, the way I'm going to solve this problem is I'm going to bring the hemline down to where I know I have 2 layers of fabric right here. And just place that right there, double check. So right here, it's going to be placed on the fold of the pattern, and this is the fold of the fabric. But up here at the top, I'm going to bend this back. So I'm going to create an additional piece just from this one right here. But what I have to do is, because I'm creating a separate pattern piece, I have to add 1/2 inch seam allowance up here. So I'm going to pin this and get ready to cut it out, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. I'm going to take this ruler and get my rotary cutter and put it 1/2 inch above the crease in the pattern. So 1/2 inch, and I'm going to cut my seam allowance. And then from here, I'm just going to go in and cut out the rest of the pattern. It's going to be a little bit narrower. Just why? Because I am making do with what I got. Now I'm going to fold this piece back again on the tunic or top length, and then I'll join you back here when I'm done. Now that this piece is cut out, I can take off my pins, and I just need to get enough fabric to cut out this top piece right here. Before I do this, I just like to take my marker and mark the center back right here with the marker, as well as the bottom. I just like putting a marker point in there. All right, so now I just have to find another piece of fabric over here to do that extra piece. The last piece I have to cut out, with the exception of the neckband and armhole bands, is this piece right here, because I'm piecing this together due to the lack of fabric. This edge has to be placed on fold. When I made this crease, I made sure this crease right here was perpendicular to the center on fold. I also have my fabric. This is just a fabric scrap that I folded. I'm following a rib. The degree of greatest stretch is going this way because this is what's going across the body. So I'm going to place this piece on the fabric right here. Here we are, and I'm just going to pin next to the fold. All right, so I'm going to have that pin in, and I'm going to make sure that this is in alignment with the line on my cutting mat. So I know this is perpendicular to a horizontal line, which would be my fold line. I'm going to put one more pin right here next to that fold, and then I'm going to start cutting out. So I don't like using a lot of pins, you know that. So I'll cut on the shoulder. I'm going to use the top cutting line and bend it back over. Get my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I am going to cut a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And here we go. So we'll think of this as a yoke piece right here, and then the bodice of our shirt is done. So I just have to make sure I have enough fabric, like I said, for the neckbands and armbands, and I do, so I'm not worried about that right now. To show you how this is all going to work out, this is going to be the back piece. And this is what we cut from an extra piece of fabric. So this will go up here, and there will be a seam on the back right there. And that seam is, think of it as a style line, and this right here is going to be the front. So this goes to show that even if you don't have enough fabric, you can make it work. You just have to get a little creative. And I run into these problems all the time because You know, you can't buy in quarter, half yards, 3/8 of a yard increments online. So sometimes you just have to make do. So this was the perfect example of how to work with a fabric issue, meaning not enough fabric. All right, you guys, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you back in lesson 6 where we're going to start to make the dress.